I've spent almost 15 years covering drug trafficking and organized crime, and the story of Ryan Wedding is one of the most unusual cases I've worked on. He went from representing Canada at the 2002 Winter Olympics to becoming the most powerful drug trafficker in his country's history. He was captured in Mexico in January of this year, but details about his arrest are still unclear. And after speaking in Mexico City with people from his inner circle and talking to official sources, I found many answers. Now let's watch a new episode of Illicit Investigations, but first, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications to go beyond the headlines.
He arrived in Los Angeles like a trophy, escorted by multiple U.S. federal agents, stepping off the plane in what looked like a walk of shame. Ryan James Wedding, known as the Giant Public Enemy and El Jefe, spent a decade hiding in Mexico while leading a transnational drug empire. He was on the FBI's 10 most wanted list, but the story of this Canadian kingpin is different. In February 2002, at the Winter Olympics in Salt Lake City, he dropped into the parallel giant slalom and finished 24th. 2 decades later, he was competing in a very different arena. His network moved massive quantities of drugs from Colombia through Mexico into the United States and Canada. The operation generated billions, laundered money through luxury assets and cryptocurrency, and enforced loyalty through fear. On January 22nd, 2026, Wedding was taken into custody in Mexico. But the backstory of that arrest remains murky. FBI Director Kash Patel described it as a ground operation carried out by the FBI's hostage rescue team with no casualties. But Mexico's Secretary of Public Security, Omar Garcia Harfuch, and the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City told a different story, that Wedding surrendered inside the embassy late that night. 2 official versions of one arrest, so we decided to investigate. 1 month earlier, in December 2025, our team traveled to Mexico City to trace Wedding's movements. We spoke with people from his inner circle, gathering details that could explain how his capture unfolded. In this episode of Illicit Investigations, we reveal new information about Ryan Wedding's capture, we expose fresh details about his life of luxury and excess in Mexico, and we uncover the hidden story behind his alliance with Los Chapitos. Don't move. The version of Ryan Wedding's arrest presented by the Mexican government and the U.S. State Department sounds almost too neat, that one of the most wanted fugitives in the world simply walked into the U.S. Embassy in Mexico City on a Thursday night and surrendered calmly, without lawyers, without negotiations, doesn't quite fit the profile, and timing matters. That same day, FBI Director Kash Patel was in Mexico City for meetings with Mexico's Secretary of Public Security, Omar Garcia Harfuch, to discuss bilateral security cooperation. To understand what really happened, we have to rewind several weeks. In November 2025, U.S. and allied agencies launched a coordinated sweep across Colombia, the United States, and Canada. 10 members of Wedding's inner circle were arrested. Among them was Carmen Valois, also known as La Negra, a Colombian national who ran a discreet escort network for wealthy clients in Mexico City and one of Wedding's closest confidants. When Wedding settled in Mexico City in 2016, Valois became part of his daily orbit. 2 women from his circle told us in December 2025 that he routinely hired 4 to 6 escorts a day. Those same women described an apartment in Polanco, one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, that Wedding used both for parties and to question people he suspected of betrayal. They also pointed to properties scattered across the state of Mexico and Morelos, including one near Mexico City that contained an underground bunker designed for long-term concealment. According to U.S. sources, once in custody, La Negra disclosed those locations. On December 31st, 2025, Mexican authorities began raiding several of them. The pressure tightened. By early January 2026, investigators believed Wedding was boxed into a shrinking zone in the state of Morelos. Surveillance flights mapped possible hideouts and tactical units staged quietly. Then on January 17, a U.S. Air Force C-130 landed at Toluca Airport. President Claudia Sheinbaum publicly described the aircraft as part of routine training under bilateral security agreements. Sources inside both governments tell a different story. that the plane was carrying an elite FBI team and specialized equipment for a high-risk capture operation. According to those sources, when Wedding realized US and Mexican units were closing in, he made a calculation: surrender before things turned violent and attempt to negotiate from custody. Governments then crafted a version both sides could live with, that Wedding simply walked into the embassy and gave himself up. But even Patel's own remarks complicated that narrative. He insisted it was an FBI-led operation on Mexican soil. Pressure on Wedding's organization intensified in January 2025 after he ordered the killing of an FBI informant, a former associate in Medellin, Colombia. Months earlier in Mexico City, the FBI had been monitoring Wedding's movements but chose not to make an arrest. The murder took place on January 31, 2025 in Medellin, Colombia. The victim was Jonathan Acevedo Garcia, a Montreal-born drug trafficker of Colombian origin who had spent years inside Ryan Wedding's organization. He knew the routes, couriers, and how drug money was hidden, and moved across borders. Acevedo Garcia and Ryan Wedding met in 2010 inside a Texas prison. Wedding was there because of his first major U.S. drug case, a failed attempt to buy cocaine from an undercover agent that ended his Olympic afterlife and put him behind bars. Acevedo Garcia was serving time after being caught moving tens of thousands of ecstasy pills from Canada into the United States. Prison forged the connection. Years after their release, Acevedo Garcia became a key operator of Wedding's organization. He coordinated drug shipments into Canada and helped move money back to Wedding, who by then was operating from Mexico. But in late 2023, Acevedo Garcia crossed a dangerous line. He agreed to cooperate with U.S. authorities. This photo was taken in January 2024 inside a Starbucks in Santa Fe, one of Mexico City's most exclusive neighborhoods, by an undercover FBI agent. He was monitoring the last in-person meeting between Ryan Wedding and Jonathan Acevedo Garcia. Another guy, Andrew Clark, also known as the Dictator, a Canadian key operator in Wedding's organization, was also present. They were organizing an operation to move between 2 and 3 tons of cocaine every month into Canada. The structure relied on a network of Canadian truckers who picked up loads in Southern California and drove them north, for which drivers earned roughly $200,000 per trip. The cocaine originated in Colombia, supplied by El Clan del Golfo, the powerful paramilitary organization that controls production zones and laboratories. From there, shipments moved into Mexico, where Wedding's network relied on protection and access provided by Los Chapitos to cross into the United States. But this operation was part of a much larger system. Investigators estimate Wedding's organization was moving up to 60 tons of cocaine per year, generating roughly $1 billion annually. Wedding also expanded into synthetic drugs, including methamphetamine and fentanyl, with production tied to labs in Canada and precursor chemicals sourced from China. US, Canadian, and Mexican authorities had been monitoring Wedding's movements and associates for years. In October 2024, Mexican agents arrested Andrew Clark in Guadalajara, removing one of Wedding's most trusted lieutenants. A year later, additional figures linked to Wedding were detained in Canada, the US, Mexico, and Colombia, including Valois, who participated in the plot to murder Jonathan Acevedo Garcia. Wedding was a party animal, moving openly through Mexico City's nightlife. Escorts who crossed paths with him told us he attended electronic music festivals like EDC Mexico, always surrounded by women and often wearing a mask to avoid photographs and recognition. He is married to Miriam Andrea Castillo from Nuevo León, Mexico, who has been linked to him since at least 2011. At the same time, he maintained relationships with other women, including Daniela Acuña, a young Colombian model sanctioned by the United States for receiving large sums of drug money. She has not been criminally charged and currently lives in Colombia. Apart from women, Wedding's other addictions were luxury and speed. In December 2025, Mexican authorities raided 4 properties tied to Wedding in Mexico City and the state of Mexico. Inside, they seized 62 high-end motorcycles, many of them museum-level machines valued at nearly $40 million. Among them were rare MotoGP race bikes, once ridden by champion Valentino Rossi, including Ducati and Aprilia models. Authorities also seized drugs, ammunition, documents, and artwork, including official reproductions by Mexican artist Jesus Lima and Olympic medals that Wedding never won. Another big seizure happened in the United States. In Miami, federal agents seized a 2002 Mercedes-Benz CLK-GTR Roadster, one of only 6 ever built, valued at roughly $13 million. The car was purchased by Roland Sokolovsky, a Toronto jeweler and key money launderer for Wedding, through his company Diamond Czar. Sokolovsky was part of a wider network that made Wedding's money disappear. Ryan Wedding did not build his empire alone. He relied on a network of associates. One of the most visible was Deepak Balwant Paradkar, known as the cocaine lawyer. Apart from being a flashy Canadian defense attorney, he identified suspected informants within Wedding's organization and interacted with corrupt law enforcement contacts. He received large payments in cash and luxury watches. Another key figure was Gianluca Tiepolo, a former Italian Special Forces operator who moved into private security and luxury vehicles. He served as one of Wedding's chief money launderers, holding assets and acquiring high-end cars and motorcycles across Europe and the UK. Tiepolo founded Windrose Tactical, a company that obtained contracts to provide military-style training to law enforcement agencies in multiple countries, including the Colombian National Police. He also trained members of Wedding's enforcement wing in Mexico. Another figure was Canadian crime blogger Gursewak Singbal, who ran Dirty News. Prosecutors allege he accepted payments to publish images of cooperating witness Jonathan Acevedo Garcia, enabling Wedding's organization to locate and eliminate him. Bal now faces U.S. charges for conspiracy to commit murder. In Mexico, Wedding relied on Edgar Vasquez, also known as the General, a former law enforcement officer who provided political and security protection through his contacts. But one of Ryan Wedding's most important connections in Mexico was Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, leader of Los Chapitos. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman was key to building Ryan Wedding's criminal organization. Their connection began in 2015 when Wedding distributed Sinaloa cartel drugs in Montreal while working with a Russian and Iranian drug trafficking ring. At the time, Wedding was starting over. After leaving a Texas prison in 2011, he was buried in debt. Court records show he filed for bankruptcy. What he still had were prison contacts, access to Canadian distribution networks, and a willingness to take risks. By 2016, Wedding relocated to Mexico City and formalized his relationship with Ivan Archivaldo. Ivan wanted to expand drug distribution into Canada, and the two became partners. Through Los Chapitos, Wedding secured large-scale cocaine supplies from Clan del Golfo in Colombia and gained access to Chinese chemical suppliers for meth and fentanyl production in Canada. Their partnership expanded beyond North America, with drug shipments reaching the United Kingdom, France, and Australia. Before the war erupted in Culiacan in 2024 between Los Chapitos and El Mayito Flaco, Wedding traveled frequently to Sinaloa to meet with Ivan Archivaldo. And as profits exploded, so did paranoia. Wedding accumulated so much cash that he built a bunker designed to sustain him for years without exposure. But even that did not prevent his capture by U.S. authorities. This is Illicit Investigations. Subscribe now to our channel and activate notifications to go beyond the headlines.